I was reading something the other day that said, what would happen if today we woke up with only that which we had given thanks to God for having yesterday? Mm-hmm. Very little. Maybe some of us might have nothing. And you know, it would be a big difference. We start to think about all the things we take for granted. And in our first reading today, there's something that kind of stood out. It really struck me. Of course, the gospel has an amazing message. But that first reading, here we have one of the young men who's standing in this fire and praying to God. And he says, we don't have anything. We don't have our priests. We don't have our temples, our sacrifices, our incense. We have nothing. Did that stop him from praying to God? No. Did it stop him from entering into that dialogue with God? No. In fact, some would say it was at that moment that the people of Israel had finally understood what God really wanted with them, was when they had been stripped of everything. Lent comes to us as an opportunity, an encouragement to allow us to do the same. Instead of having it forced upon us, we choose to take away those things that often we think we need, to encounter God in this just most exposed and authentic way. And it makes us ask the questions, what do I use to keep God at an arm's length? What do I use to kind of keep my involvement in this relationship in distance and not allow God to reach into the deeper parts of my life, to transform them? And so it gives a beautiful context to hear this parable that Jesus talks about forgiveness. Especially, it points at something that I think is a difficult time understanding. It would seem that people would look at the king and say, well, of course he's generous, of course he's lenient, he has so much, he's wealthy. He can forgive that because he can stand to lose that kind of money and not be affected. But that's not the point. The point is that the generosity came from some part within him. And that it doesn't matter if we have wealth or lots of resources. It matters most what sort of attitude that we have within the context of our heart. And that's what Jesus was trying to teach his disciples. That is what is going to most affect your relationship with God and with each other. And if we do not foster generosity and charity and mercy in our heart, there's no amount of resources that can move us to be that way. There are people who are dirt poor, who have nothing, and are the most generous people on the earth. And there are people who have so much and will not even spare a fraction. So we know that it's not simply the amount of resources that creates this sense of generosity. It is that relationship with God, who is love itself, who is patience itself, who is mercy, who fosters within our hearts generosity, charity, mercy. From that place, from that meeting of God in the deepest part of our heart, that springs forth a different attitude of looking at everything around us as possibly being a way in which we can engage that relationship with God and share with those who are in need. And so, my brothers and sisters, we're very near to the midpoint of Lent. And so we still have this opportunity. Can we take this time and choose to detach ourselves from those structures we think are oh so important, but instead reach deep within that most basic, exposed, authentic place, encounter God, and like the servant there, just beg him to create within us an attitude of gratefulness, generosity, mercy, charity. And from that place to spring forth new life and works.